All right, another episode of the Square and Compass podcast on the West Coast, virtually, anyways. I haven't actually, I've had the chance to visit some lodges in California and virtually do some interviews with brothers in Seattle and Washington State, never in Oregon. So this is my first time there, virtually or otherwise. We have got worshipful brother Mike Churchill and brother Steve Witten of Multnomah Lodge number 1. If anyone knows anything about Masonic numbers or how lodges are numbered, number one's a pretty big deal. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
Sure. Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for your interest.
Yeah, well, everybody finds different things that they love about Freemasonry or that interest them about the craft. And that can be true whether you're a Freemason or not. And there are a lot of people who aren't Freemasons but are interested in the craft. And I think one thing that a lot of people really find of interest is the history of their fraternity, whether it be the fraternity as a whole or individual lodges and their history and their importance to history of their states, their communities, and your lodge, Multnomah Lodge, talk about historical lodge and, a lodge that's relevant to the history of the area. I mean, just for example, right, the first chartered lodge west of the Missouri River, right, older than 3/5 of the states in the Union of the United States. I mean, let's start with we were talking a bit offline, but Brother Witten, just tell me a little bit about the history of, Multnomah Lodge number 1. For example, when was it chartered and under which state was it chartered, under which Grand Lodge?
Multnomah Lodge number 1 was chartered in October of 1846 under the jurisdiction of the Grand Lodge of Missouri. I think it was October 19th. Several Freemasons in Oregon City, Oregon, wanted to form a lodge in Oregon City. Oregon wouldn't become a state until 1859, and Oregon City was the western end of the Oregon Trail, so it was a fairly thriving metropolis in 1846. It had river access, so you could move goods between the Pacific and Oregon City fairly easily, and the Willamette Valley, where both Portland and Oregon City are located, was probably some of the most fertile farmland in the world. And so, with the coming of the migration west, Oregon City became a pretty thriving city. So several Freemasons in Oregon City petitioned the Grand Lodge of Oregon, or the Grand Lodge of Missouri, for a charter. The charter was granted in 1846, and we were chartered as Multnomah Lodge number 84 under the Grand Lodge of Oregon. The charter came overland from Missouri to Oregon City, but didn't arrive until 1848. And so our first meeting under the Missouri charter didn't take place until 1848. Our first master under the Missouri charter was a guy named John Ainsworth. He owned a fleet of steamships and plied moved goods from up and down the Willamette River as far west as Astoria, which is the Pacific Ocean. And he later became the third Grand Master of Oregon. So he's a pretty famous guy around here, like streets and schools, and his house still stands in Oregon City. It's a museum. He later decided to move to Oakland, California, where he died, and I don't know exactly why that was, but
what is it?
Nutshell history.
What is it like for? Well, we'll start with the worshipful master. what is it like for you to be being the master of a lodge with, I mean, such a rich history, and to be kind of so relevant to even the Grand Lodge of Oregon, right? You guys were one of the 3 founding lodges. Just what's it like to be in that chair in the East as Worship Master of such a historical lodge?
Well, it's an honor. I mean, we have, because we sold our original building in 2012. A lot of the, all the pictures of all the masters from the original dates were on the wall. And so all those pictures we still have, they're all in storage boxes because, like I said, we sold our original building in 2012, and then moved a couple times. Now we're meeting at the Scottish Rite building in downtown Portland. But when you see those boxes, all those pictures of all those masters and all that history, it's quite an honor to be in the East. The last few years haven't been very user friendly because of the pandemic, and like I said, we did sell our building in 2012, but and so we've been down to a smaller group of guys, but now in the last 2 weeks we've had a double fellowcraft followed by another fellowcraft and an EA on the same day. And this Saturday we're having our first Master Mason degree since before the pandemic. So we're in a rebuilding phase. So that's what we're looking forward to, is to rebuilding those numbers now that we can meet without masks, and and hopefully we'll have larger a membership than we've had in the last couple of years. So yeah, quite an honor.
Downtown Portland has a, sort of unique demographic for us. There's a major university in downtown Portland, and we tend to, we get a lot of interest from college students. We tend to be pretty picky about the ones that we take, mostly because college students don't tend to stick around. And we need people that are in it. I mean, not to say that college students aren't in it for the long haul, but we need people who are willing to join with us and be with us and participate with us in all the things that we do. And we just don't do meetings. We're heavily involved in charity work and that kind of stuff. So we need people to sort of replace guys like me and Mike, who are at the tail end of our careers. And so we're trying to build, not necessarily establish a legacy, but keep the future, keep Multnomah One alive into the future.
Well, I mean, how does a lodge go about doing that, right? Because I think that you're touching on a challenge that a lot of, well, really groups in general, but we'll stick to Masons, Masonic lodges are facing, which is, there's a lot that has changed in the world between 1846 and 2022. Certainly a lot that's changed since the 1950s, which is kind of the last boom period of Masonic engagement and Masonic involvement, and civil or civic involvement more generally in life. How does a lodge begin the process of rebuilding or growing itself in 2022? At least what have you guys been doing to try to make sure that takes place?
Well, certainly our charity work is a powerful message, that we're not just we're not just a bunch of guys in a sealed room wearing funny clothes and and doing these strange rituals. We try and get out in the community as much as we can, and that's not just the broader Masonic community, but the general population and in the general community. We attach our name to a lot of charitable endeavors, and so that gets out there, and we try and do stuff like this, or just recently Mike and I were involved in a presentation of school supplies that the Grand Lodge puts on every month, and we got on TV, and so we try and we're always looking for opportunities to get our name and faces and everything out there, but frankly, we have to be pretty picky about it. We're not necessarily going to go on in a forum like this sponsored by an evangelical church, for example, who would be hostile or ask a bunch of gotcha questions or that kind of thing. And so we're still sort of discovering that. The internet helps a lot too, although we're not terribly involved in social media because that generates a lot of the wrong kind of interest, we think.
I could kind of relate what originally attracted me to Masonry, 12, 14 years ago. And that was my dad had been a Mason since the middle 60s, and his brother, my uncle, and then his father, my grandfather, were all Masons. And so I knew about that heritage. But the thing that really attracted me to it, and I think this will probably something that is one of our basic tenets, and that is that I think it's more important to focus on the charitable endeavors, like Steve was mentioning. What really drew me to it was when I overheard my dad talking about the amount of scholarships that they awarded every year. My dad at that time was a member of Scottish Rite, and one of the brothers left his entire estate, which was many millions of dollars, to the Scottish Rite in Washington, and they were giving $200,000 to $300,000 in college scholarships every year. And when I heard him talk about that, then all of a sudden it became a lot more attractive and appealing to me, rather than just a bunch of old guys in funny hats and aprons sitting around at a business meeting. And I thought, wow, that's the connection I've been looking for. And so that's what originally attracted me to it. And since then, since I joined, pretty much we've had the charities have been one of the major focuses that our lodges involved with. Specifically, we've had a robust bikes and Kindles for books program in local elementary schools for about 10 years, I believe. And so, rather than when I meet people who are interested and ask about it, those are typically the explanations I give. It's not just because we like to sit around and look at our aprons and all the things about the ritual, all those kinds of things. What I strive to emphasize on is our charitable endeavors. Education is, that's one of our major reasons for being. And so those are the things that I think those are will always have universal appeal, regardless of economic times being tough like they are now. And there's also this, a lot more people spend so much time not being associated with each other face to face. They're on their electronic devices or whatever. And so this is a focus that they can actually do really good work for the community at large. They can do that locally by, getting involved in a charitable organization like the Masons. And so I think that's, one of the things that will help us to bring new people on. I think, now that we're kind of past the pandemic, hopefully, and people are coming out of their sheltered existence for a while. And so we're hoping that, there'll be enough interest in younger guys that realize what we do, and they'll want to join us. So that's our hope. Steve's been a Mason for 30 some years,
40 years.
and I've only been a Mason about 12 or 14 years, I think. So he's got a lot more experience in it than me. But anyway, that's kind of what we're hoping, is that we can attract new people to help us in our endeavors to make the world a better place.
Do you think that being being a historical lodge, being so being historical, being older, being so relevant, I guess, to your community, to Oregon, do you think that affects the way your lodge or your brethren or certainly officers look at charitable endeavors and community work, right? Being that the lodge is so connected to the history of the state, to the history of the Grand Lodge there, do you think that gives, or how does that affect the way the lodge looks at charitable works? Do you think it gives it more of an impetus to be engaged in the community, or even at the membership level, do you think the members feel more of an impetus to not promote, but to be engaged, or to be a bridge between the community and the lodge through charitable endeavors?
Go ahead, Steve.
I think I'm just thinking of our current small number of active members. I think it's a source of great pride for them to say, look what we do, and sort of slyly say, and you can be a part of it too. And we're not just this insular group that meets in closed rooms. We're out there trying to make, actively trying to make the world a better place, or at least our little corner of it anyway. And certainly our membership, whenever they have the opportunity to mention that, they do, and it's a source of great pride among all of us. And we don't go out of our way to put our name on buildings and that kind of stuff, although we need to make a decision soon about what we're going to call the activity room that we funded at the Scottish Rite Speech and Language Clinic at Portland State. But that would be the only thing that we put our name on. I mean, we've had our name on T-shirts and that kind of stuff, but that would be the only kind of permanent name that, permanent marker that we've sort of actively promoted. I mean, the rest of it has just been word of mouth, or, we usually get a shout out at the annual communication every year, and, that kind of stuff. So, it's not like we're out there, waving our hands and saying, "Hey, look at us." We try and be examples, and if that rubs off on somebody, we're happy to have them join us.
there's always that challenge, I think, in Freemasonry, right? And, Brother Steve, you touched on this in your answer, right? There's the balance or the challenge that a lot of Masons feel between wanting to promote or advertise or, pick your term, the craft or their lodge or their Masonic involvement, and, a a tendency for Freemasonry as an organization to want to be quiet about its works or its community involvement or what it does, or any, the famous the famous debate around solicitation of membership and what constitutes proper versus improper solicitation, all of those type of things, right? And you did touch on this a little bit in your answer. you know Obviously, for I think every Freemason, or at least every good Freemason, the work, doing the good works in the community is meant as its own reward, just as being a member is its own reward. And there's a tendency to want to be quiet and maybe not put your name on it or not promote what you're doing. But at the same time, right, if you don't do that, how does the community learn about you and find you to help that lodge
Right.
grow? So as a worshipful master, for example, where do you find that balance between letting the work speak for itself, but also, making sure that the lodge and the Masons get the credit for it, not so much out of a desire for credit, but out of a desire to find and attract new membership within the community?
Well, just say the Bikes for Books program. There's very little way to connect with kids that are in an elementary school about what the square and compass is and what Masonry means. But I know for a fact that if we wouldn't have ever had a Bikes for Books program and we've had this constant presence in schools, that those kids, young kids, and so we've been doing it so long that the first kids that we that knew about Bikes for Books and Kindles for Books, that were in kindergarten and first grade, they're now in middle school and high school. So there is that's an exposure of this guy that was a Freemason, he they gave bikes to my school, and we were able to, and I won a bike and it was promoting reading. And so, I've been I was a smart reader for 8 years, and I know that there's, that knowledge is passed along. And I mean, you could look at it as marketing, however you want to look at it. But I would say that, the parents of the kids that are exposed to that, they know that, we don't need anything in return. The reward for us is that we're promoting, education and reading. And like Steve mentioned, we just got involved with the this Grand Lodge thing that they're promoting in schools, school supplies, school of the month. And, this entire classroom, they got them on TV saying, "Thank you, Oregon Freemasons." So, that kind of knowledge is, what will, it'll ring a bell someday in the future. Some young guy, he's in his 20s, and he recalls being exposed to that when he was young. And then one of these days, maybe he has his own family. And from that, typically, when somebody has their own family, their own kids, they want to make the world a better place for their own kids. And so here's that connection. And so that's what I think that we're kind of looking for, as far as getting the word out about, what Masons do, So that's the way I look at it. And I think that exposes, the local community and the state to people who would never have known anything about it except Dan Brown. So.
Most of us in Multnomah One are of the mindset that, charity doesn't have to mean grand gestures. Grand gestures are great, and they tend to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of fleeting in their impact. But small acts of kindness every day, even if there's no, exchange of money or any of that kind of stuff, really, really make a difference. And so, our attitude is to just try and be it every day, and I used to live in downtown Portland, and prior to the pandemic, Portland was a fairly heavily visited tourist city, and so you'd be out downtown and you'd see these people looking at their transit maps, and they'd have them upside down or whatever, and looking at their phones, trying to figure out where they are and where they needed to go, and just walking up to them and say, "Can I help you find something?" And maybe you're wearing a square and compass T-shirt, or maybe not, and it's we all believe that it's stuff like that that really, really moves the needle. Like I said, grand gestures are great, and giving away lots of money is great too, but it's the little stuff that nobody ever notices that really, really moves the needle.
Is that that's a really, I think, valid point. It's easy to overlook that, not only in Freemasonry, but in life in general, right? This idea that everybody's focused on the grand, somebody once told me life is a game of base hits, right? Not home runs. You don't need to knock it out of the park every time. You just get on base and get on base, and eventually you'll find success, right? Instead of always focusing on the big grand gesture. But I think that that's a lesson that can probably be applied to just Freemasonry in general. I don't think it's speaking out of school to say that in North America, the craft has been and is struggling in terms of membership numbers, attendance, all that type of stuff. We're seeing it, and at least we're seeing it in Ontario. We're seeing it in most jurisdictions in North America. And I think a lot of Masons, a lot of lodges, in response to the struggles, they seem to be trying to go for the home run, right? The one big thing that will turn it all around, the big program, the big gesture, the big whatever it is that moves everything, that moves the needle, right? And I think whether it's charitable endeavors like Brother Steve was saying, or Freemasonry more in general, it really is just a lot of small steps over time is how it turns itself around, right? And that sometimes that I think can be frustrating for brothers, for lodges, because they want the one thing that's a solution to these problems. And I think like what Steve was saying, right? It's not about one grand gesture, one grand thing. It's if every lodge, if every Mason just puts in a little bit more time and a little bit more efforts, that's how you will end up kind of turning things around.
The Grand Lodge of Oregon has a fairly robust marketing program. The lady that runs it, she's a pro, and so we've seen advertisements for Oregon Freemasonry on Max trains. Max is our local light rail system. I've seen them on buses, There's been TV ads, that kind of thing. I mean, obviously compared to like Budweiser or, Ford, they're pretty modest efforts, but, it gets our name out there in the Portland metro community. And so,
So,
we get inquiries every now and then, we have that say, well, I saw your name on, a billboard or a bus or
TV.
I went to the, Gaffney Lane Elementary School when I was, 8. And we take all of that stuff fairly seriously. Not all of them, not all of those inquiries become Masons for all the reasons that everyone knows. But, we try and, the people that do come to us, we take great care to make sure that we're open and honest with them and stress that they need to do the same with us. And, Oregon is a background check state, so we have to run a background check, and so we'll find out if they're not telling us the truth. And um, so anyway, we don't necessarily recruit, but the people that come to us, we take great care in treating them honestly and fairly and making sure that they know what they're getting into, because we all view this as a lifetime thing. And um, if you don't view it that way, you're not going to be very successful at it.
well, and I think that's kind of the point, right? That statement there. So advertising, call it whatever you want, right? Campaigns, things of that nature, right? Those are great, obviously, and that's the first step. Excuse me. But then, like you said, right, it's a lifetime process. So it's not just about getting somebody's interest. It's then about the follow up, and then it's about 20 years down the line, right? Are they still active?
Right,
Are they still part of it? Even 10 years, 5 years down the line, right? And that really is
right.
a lot of just small steps, trying to make your meetings more interesting, trying to get, maintain contact with your brothers. It's those things that happen after the campaign or after that initial contact. And that's not something that starts and stops. That's, as you said, right? That's a lifelong, you're in it,
Right,
the Masonic career lasts as
right.
long as the person does, really.
We've done, Mike and I both have hammered on the Grand Lodge about getting some direction about how to make meetings, especially more stated meetings, more interesting. And there's all these publications that you can subscribe to that have all of these stories from the 1940s and the Civil War and that kind of stuff. And sometimes, most of the time, that doesn't work with, for lack of a better term, the internet generation. And um, so, I mean, we're always looking for ways to engage people. After the lockdowns were over and we could meet face to face again, we had these 4 guys who had been like waiting in the queue for a year or more because we couldn't do degree work. And so what we ended up doing was, I probably shouldn't say this, but before the Grand Lodge shut us down, we were opening on, doing the standard opening ritual, right, which was tiled. And then we would go to refreshment and then invite the four guys in the queue in so that they could participate in the business meeting. I mean, and business meetings aren't terribly interesting to begin with, but at least it gave them a sense that they belonged, and I think part of the reason that they're still with us today. We only lost one, and that's because he moved away. So, that's just another one of those little things that you can do to sort of keep people's interest. Now, the pandemic was an extraordinary circumstance, but, extraordinary circumstance often leads to extraordinary opportunity. And, most
Well,
people wouldn't call what we did extraordinary, but we thought it was pretty revolutionary given how conservative Oregon Freemasonry in general is.
this is something I've talked about a lot. I brought this up a lot in other interviews with my own Grand Lodge. You bring up the idea of, and you said, approaching Grand Lodge about how does a lodge create a more engaging meeting environment, basically, for or
Right.
meeting agenda to encourage attendance, encourage maybe some rusty Masons, or we call them, Masons you haven't seen in a while, to return. And I always struggle with that. I mean, I guess it could be a question of semantics, but I think there's something there to be explored, right? Which is, do meetings is the issue that we have failed to make our meetings engaging, or is that we failed to change our meetings sufficiently so they're engaging to the membership? Or is the issue that the membership doesn't understand the value of the meetings as they are? Like, I because I'm very lazy, so I equate it often to exercise, right? I don't like to exercise. I I rather not fond of it, but I do it regularly. And if I didn't know why I was exercising, or if nobody came and told me the benefits of it, I would likely quit after the first session, because I'd be like, well, this is not fun and not enjoyable, and I don't like this. But I keep doing it because I understand and I know that there's a benefit that I will experience if I keep at it. And I think when it comes to Freemasonry, so often, the focus I've seen is we need to make meetings more fun, we need to make meetings more enjoyable, and that's all fine. But sometimes a meeting is just going to suck. Nobody
Right.
enjoys minutes, nobody enjoys paying bills, all the business aspects of it, but that's still important and necessary to a well-functioning lodge. And if membership isn't taking the time to learn about how that works and taking part in those meetings, that's going to affect the ability of the lodge to continue. You can't do charitable activities if you have a lodge that doesn't know anything about the finances of how it's
Right.
working. And I just think sometimes it's okay to say, like, yes, this is the quote unquote boring part of Freemasonry. This is the dull part, but it's still relevant. It's relevant to the lodge and it's
Sure.
relevant to the Masonic journey. And trying to explain it from that approach, because with exercise, there's a point where it just isn't fun and you can't make it fun, but you can make it meaningful and relevant.
Right.
Sure. Well, I think if we were to sell masonry as okay, yeah, let's you become a member and we'll see you 2 hours a month at the meeting. Nobody wants to do that. But if you told them that, that's what we typically have, is we have a meeting once a month, but then during the month, we have opportunities. And now, since the pandemic is, on the way out, hopefully, we'll be able to do what we were doing immediately before the pandemic. We started trying to get together with the families, social activities. We had we went bowling a couple times, and the families were invited, and the kids and the wife, and those kinds of things. So if the whole idea is it's a group of guys that you like being around and that you can be around and have fun. You can have, dinners and social activities. That's what will draw people more than a business meeting once a month. It has to be fun, like back to the exercise thing. I mean, one of the things that makes it fun for me is it makes me feel better when I do it. When I'm doing it, yeah, it's okay. But the benefit I get from it is that it makes me feel better. I can take my dog, I get to enjoy the day, and all those other side things. So are what attract people. And so, beyond the once a month meetings, we'll need to try to get back into social events because that's what keeps people engaged. I mean, I've taken our senior warden, I've taken both of his daughters in my boat fishing, in the last 2 springs in a row. And all those kinds of things where it's an engagement with the membership outside of the lodge. That's what will attract and keep people. So that's kind of the way I look at it. It has to be more than just a meeting, and it has to be fun.
Yeah, I think our approach of late has been to keep the meetings mercifully short. I mean, last night we had a stated meeting last night, and I don't think it lasted half an hour. We move all of the minutes, the treasurer's report, all online, so we did just skip past all that stuff. And except for the vote, did everybody read it? Raise your hand, and then that's the vote to approve. And we're required to construct a budget every year, so most of our bills are paid on the budget, which doesn't require a vote. And so that skip past all of that stuff. So our meetings are basically announcements, sickness and cheer, and that's pretty much it. So we spent half an hour last night in the meeting, and then an hour and a half eating sandwiches and talking about basketball and the Who concert a guy is going to with his kids and that sort of stuff. And so
Fellowship.
yeah, the fellowship part of it. And I have a daughter that has an old truck, and there's a guy who we just passed to Fellowcraft a couple of weekends ago, and he likes working on old trucks, so he comes over and he helps my daughter work on her old truck. And I go out and get some sub sandwiches and a couple of beers, and we sit out on the front porch, and after the work on the truck is done, and some of that is successful, some of it's not so successful. And the pandemic certainly hasn't helped any of it be successful, but you play the hand that you're dealt, and so we're trying, and we're trying whatever we think will work, and if it doesn't work, we try something else, and we try and learn from every opportunity, whether it works or not.
I mean, I 100% agree with that, right? Just trying is half the battle.
Sure. One of our advantages
we have a
is
fairly good relationship with Grand Lodge too. The immediate, or specifically the Grand Secretary, who is the sort of only professional member of Grand Lodge, since all of the staff at Grand Lodge reports to him. We've tried to cultivate that relationship when as best we could, and lean on him heavily for advice about how to do things, what does he think, that sort of stuff. The guy who was the Grand Secretary 2 Grand Secretaries ago, is now the guy in line to become SGIG of the Scottish Rite, and we've all known him we've known all of them for years, and I think, you know, most lodges have sort of an adversary, at least lodges in Oregon have an adversarial relationship with Grand Lodge. I mean, God knows we've had that in the past and probably still have one too, but we've tried to really foster good relationship with Grand Lodge because they can help, and especially the employees of Grand Lodge, you know. So if you need something done at Grand Lodge, the person you talk to is Marissa or Tiffany or Kristen. You don't talk to the Grand Secretary or the Grand Master. I mean, um, and yeah, he's busy or not in the office or whatever. And you know, you talk to the lady who's shuffling paper and answering the phone and that sort of stuff. So once the Grand Master gets out of the Grand East, then like all of the pressure comes off. Like the immediate past Grand Master of Oregon is going to be the third ruffian in our upcoming Master Mason degree, and he's bringing two guys from Salem to help us out, and you know, so we're going to feed him roast pork and and have a good time.
One of the advantages we have is where we're meeting now is at the Scottish Rite building. And that building is one of the few in the nation that was built and still used exclusively, pretty much exclusively for Scottish Rite activities. They've got a beautiful theater there with turn of the century hand painted drops. And typically when we bring people that are new members and even people that aren't Masons can tour the building, and that is an opportunity for new Masons to be exposed to that, and members of the Scottish Rite, you know, they have a lot more opportunity to be social with each other because the degrees that are put on are witnessed by people in the audience. And then after every degree is over, then there is a beautiful lounge library that's open, and we can all get together and socialize and talk about the degree and other things that we're doing in our Blue Lodges. And the Blue Lodges is like right in the same building. So that's a really good opportunity for that kind of socialization. So, and it also promotes membership in the Scottish Rite too. For once people become Master Masons, they can go on to be Scottish Rite Masons or Shriners or whatever. But so the Scottish Rite, just being in that building I think that's a big advantage for social skills. So.
The Scottish Rite Center in downtown Portland was built in 1904, and it's probably one of the only half a dozen built Scottish Rite centers in the United States that's still used exclusively for the Scottish Rite. And although you can rent it or rent parts of it, the theater and the dressing rooms and the stuff that's, you know, was put there for built in vaudeville years for the Scottish Rite is not generally seen by the public. And so you know, the building manager there regularly conducts tours of the building. People who have walked by it, you know, thousands of times and just wondered what it was, and all you have to do is knock on the door.
I think that's a pretty common thing. A lot of Masonic buildings, even in Windsor, people walk by it every day and they don't know what's inside or what it means to the community or to the Masons of the community, right? And that's that's just one of those unfortunate things. You know, a lot of places are really encouraging their Masonic buildings to be more open to the public, which I think is a good thing. I think the more that do that, the better it is for the craft and for the lodge as a whole.
Yeah. Do you guys have Scottish Rite in Canada? I heard
Yep.
some from somewhere that it didn't exist in Canada. That the
No, no, we
York
got.
Rite was bigger.
I'm a member. I'm 18th degree, so I'm Rose Qua.
Okay. So the system must be a little different in Canada because in the United States, or at least in Oregon, when you attend a Scottish Rite reunion, you exit as a 32nd degree, and then here in Portland, so if you're going to join the Scottish Rite, you go through a reunion, which is typically on a weekend, and you go from Master Mason to Master of the Royal Secret in a weekend. And here in Portland, all of the 32 minus 3, 29 degrees of the Scottish Rite are performed in that theater live over a 2-year cycle. So with lights, sound, costumes, backdrops, the works. And so it's quite a production, and there's quite a core of dedicated people who do that. And Mike has participated in several degrees, and every month they put together a cast for a degree presentation, and they're typically held on the third Tuesday of the month. And so that's a pretty powerful advertising tool as well. Come to the Scottish Rite and see what Freemasonry really is about. And
You know, that's always well, in terms of in Canada, right? Well, at least Windsor Valley, for myself, we have 3 reunions. We have the Lodge of Perfection, which goes up to I should know this, up to the 14th, and then Rose Qua,
yeah,
the 18th, and then I guess 13th. Lodge of Perfection goes to 13th, Rose Qua up to the 18th, and then you can go to Hamilton, which is about 4 hours away from us, give or take, for a consistory, which
right.
I haven't done yet because I'm busy enough with my 2 lodges as it is. Secretary of one of them. The going back to what the Worshipful Master had mentioned earlier, and yourself, Brother Steve, right? Keeping the business meeting short, focusing on the fellowship, focusing on the relationships between the brothers and their families. The challenge of that, and I think this is something that COVID exacerbated a lot, at least in Ontario. Right, during COVID, when in-person meetings were suspended, our Grand Lodge basically allowed for the master, secretary, and treasurer to basically handle lodge business without needing to have a business meeting and a motion and a vote and things of that nature, right? And that was for
Right.
about a year and a half before we started meeting in person again. And I think during that time, it became easy for the membership started to feel like a lot of work, and a lot of the financial work and the administrative stuff. It was even more so than before. It was so kind of brought upward on those 3 offices that membership, at best felt like kind of a rubber stamp for whatever was happening.
Right.
And then the danger of that is, if something happens, let's say secretary has to move suddenly for work, or a treasurer has to, or whatever, something happens where there needs to be a quick change. Is the membership engaged enough and involved enough in those administrative tasks that they're going to be able to step in and, to replace the secretary. I've given this example before. It seems like a small example, but I think it's emblematic of this concern. And I've been seeing this in a lot of Masonic jurisdictions where more and more work is being done by fewer and fewer people. In our building,
Mike and I know that really well.
in our building, we one of the washrooms didn't have any toilet paper, and no one knew where the toilet paper was to replace it. And it's a small example, but it's one of those things where it's like if you as a brother or a member of a lodge of a building aren't paying attention to these things, something happens to somebody who, something happens to the person who knows where the toilet paper is. Suddenly it becomes an issue. Making sure that membership is engaged in the actual work of maintaining a lodge and not just the fun parts of, the refreshment hours and the socialization.
Right.
Social functions.
Well, while the lockdowns were happening, we started meeting by phone conference. We couldn't conduct business, so that was just a social thing, just to sort of check in and see how everyone was doing and if anybody needed anything or, that kind of thing. And then we kind of graduated to Zoom for that. Yeah. And, even after the pandemic lessened somewhat and we could meet face to face, we still continued to have regular Zoom calls and just to kind of make sure everybody was okay and, whose brother had COVID and, didn't accomplish really anything except to, be able to look at everybody's face and say, and hear their voice and email is a great thing and text messages are a great thing, but you can't see people. And I think we're going to start. Mike is exiting the master's chair after 3 years of pandemic service, and we're going to have a newer, younger guy next year. And I'm trying to get him to kind of reestablish the regimen of Zoom meetings in between the monthly stated meetings and
officers meetings.
Officers meetings, although officers meetings for Multnomah 1 just means everybody, just means a not tiled meeting. And
I'm fine with keeping up a schedule of virtual meetings. We still do that, and I invited you guys out. And my affiliate lodge, where I'm secretary, we've maintained our schedule of virtual meetings while also returning to in person. I think they're a good way to maintain contact and bring in visitors that couldn't visit otherwise.
Right, we've done that as well. Since the virtual meetings are not tiled, we have invited visitors or people who have contacted us expressing interest and that kind of thing. So when we meet new prospects, we take great pains to not meet in the kind of lodge environment settings, because we want people to be relaxed and not feel like it's an interrogation and that kind of thing. So because to us, and probably more, I'm searching for a word here, but to us, it's more about personal relationships and knowing that people want to be there than just filling out forms and writing checks and going through the degrees and that sort of thing. So that's the ultimate goal, to get you through the degrees, but for us it's for you to become one of us. And not that we're anything special, but it's that bond that we have with each other.
One of the things that was becoming kind of evident even before the pandemic was that, our society kind of headed in the direction of, people were more or less involved with their own families and their own things. And the tendency was kind of towards not being as social as we once were. There's a lot of different reasons for that, so that was becoming a challenge even before the pandemic. So now, on the other side of this pandemic thing, we're still faced with those same things, and it takes even more effort to get people back together and being social, trying to relearn those things that we were without for a couple of years. So, in a lot of respects, we're having to start even back before the pandemic hit. That kind of stuff was kind of becoming the rule, that people were just like, oh, okay, well, as long as it's just my family or just me, that's all I'm really interested in. And so it's a general effort to get people engaged with each other more, and so we're faced with that too. So we just have to keep trying, whatever we can do to make that more, so it's more engaging to get together with your friends and your extended families. That's kind of where we're at now. So we're working on it.
You can hear Mike's dog Norm in the background there.
Yeah, I can hear it too.
I think he's ready for the interview to be over, so we'll give him a chance to go outside, it sounds like. But I think it's a good place to end it. Just keep trying, right? I think it's easy to perhaps sometimes become frustrated with whatever it is, right? With lodges not having the attendance you want or the membership you want or whatever it might be, right? But there are a lot of bright spots as well, and such as with your lodge and the work you're doing, your first third degree since pre-pandemic coming up shortly on the 15th. Like, if you just keep putting the time and the effort and the work into it, just like you said, right? I think, it's possible to see lodges and to see Freemasonry grow. Just takes time.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't, I'm sure those first four guys in Oregon City in 1846 probably faced a lot of the same stuff. How do we get bigger? How do we become the positive force that we want to be? And I can't imagine them having any flashes of brilliance that we haven't had, and failed as much as we've failed, and so we just got to keep, not wallow in it. Just pick yourself up and dust yourself off and move forward.